June 1, 2011, the Waller family's life took on turn. A woman named Jackie contacted her sister Cheryl, informing her that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay. Jackie planned to return home later that day. However, she never came back, nor did she make any further contact. Worried and unable to reach Jackie, Cheryl became increasingly anxious. By around 7 p.m., Cheryl decided to drive to the police station. Here, she made a startling statement, claimed that Clay Waller had killed her sister. The police officers found this accusation shocking, since Jackie had only called a few hours earlier, and there hadn't been any immediate cause for concern or reason to believe she was in danger at that time. Despite the unusual nature of Cheryl's assertion, it eventually became apparent that her instincts were correct. Jackie was indeed entangled in a troubling situation. So what exactly happened to Jackie? And why was Cheryl so convinced her sister had been murdered by her ex-husband even before Jackie was declared missing? Jackie was known for being sweet, kind, and caring. When she met Clay, there was an instant connection between them. Clay had a speech impediment that had subjected him to ridicule by others. This made him feel awkward and uncomfortable in social situations. However, unlike others, Jackie didn't ridicule him. Instead, she defended him and ensured he wasn't hurt by people's unkind remarks. Jackie's nature was all about protecting the vulnerable, fighting injustice, and helping everyone around her. It wasn't long before their bond grew stronger and they got married. At the time of their marriage, both were about 30 years old and aspired to have a large family. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, where Jackie began creating a family nest. She had a successful career. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said about Clay. His life consisted of numerous failures and he struggled with holding down any job for long periods. As a result, Jackie became the primary breadwinner of the family. She always dreamed of having children, but faced challenges in conceiving naturally. Determined to become a mother though, she underwent fertility treatments, commonly referred to as ECO. So when Jackie discovered she was pregnant with triplets no less, her joy knew no bounds. The family included 2 girls, Abai and Addison, plus 1 boy, Maddox. It was incredibly challenging for the woman to care for 3 children at once. Nonetheless, she did not complain. She continued to shoulder all responsibilities by herself without relying on her husband. He seemed uninterested in the children. At that time, took a job with the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife cared for the children. However, he didn't stay long. He was fired after a year. Only Jackie's parents and sister provided assistance with the children, allowing her some respite. When Clay lost his job, Jackie took on work to support the entire family. Even after their children were born, Clay did not change his behavior and showed little interest in either his family or work. Occasionally, he engaged in part-time work that didn't bring in the expected income. Clay seemed comfortable, living off his wife's hard work. She worked 40 hours a week and managed the household simultaneously. Jackie's career progressed rapidly. She soon secured a management position at an insurance company branch. This advancement further relaxed Clay's attitude toward financial responsibility. Instead of appreciating his wife's efforts, Clay mistreated her in various ways. He insulted her frequently, called her worthless, and demeaned her value by stating no one wanted her. His infidelities and abusive actions caused significant distress. Jackie's parents and sister were deeply troubled by Clay's behavior and urged her to divorce him. However, Jackie was reluctant to take such a drastic step at that time and tried to salvage their marriage. Every day brought diminishing hope that their relationship could be saved. Over the next few years, financial difficulties compounded their problems. Because Clay was not working while Jackie's salary could no longer cover all expenses for their large family. Mounting mortgage debts led to their house being foreclosed upon. The woman decided it was time to move in with sister, seizing upon the opportunity. Her husband then relocated to a friend's place. At this point, their children were a bit older. Jackie faced the tough, yet necessary choice to file for divorce. She believed she and her kids deserved a better life. When Jackie brought this up with her husband, Clay seemed calm initially. However, he soon changed his stance and refused the divorce. His threats started subtly, but gradually escalated into direct threats against her life. He warned that divorcing him would be like signing a death warrant for herself and their children. These threats terrified Jackie, yet she remained resolute. Living under such conditions was no longer an option for her, so she sought ways to end her marriage with Clay. She turned to her family, sharing the troubling behaviors of her husband, and began keeping a diary to document his actions. Jackie also noticed that Clay was stalking her. For the sake of safety, she and her children moved in with her sister during this period. Her kids were only 5 years old and didn't understand the situation fully. Nonetheless, Jackie explained that their current living arrangement was crucial. Time passed, and things began to stabilize as the divorce process neared its conclusion. It appeared that Clay had come to terms with their separation and ceased his harassment towards Jackie. They even started forming new relationships on the side. Jackie allowed Clay visitation rights with their children, and disputes between them reduced significantly. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jackie agreed to meet at the attorney's office to finalize the last aspects of their divorce. On that day, their son Maddox was visiting his father while Jackie's other children stayed with Cheryl, Jackie's sister. After the meeting at the attorney's office, Jackie planned to pick up Maddox from Clay's house before heading back to Cheryl's place. Leaving the office, Jackie telephoned her sister Cheryl to report that everything had gone smoothly and mentioned she was on her way to collect Maddox from Clay's residence before returning home. That conversation would be their last. Jackie gradually lost touch. As time passed, her sister became increasingly anxious and started calling Jackie, but there was no answer. She then tried calling Clay, but he didn't respond either. Cheryl began to suspect that Clay had done something to Jackie. She sent him a text message. "If I don't hear from Jackie in 5 minutes, I'm going to the police." Almost immediately called back asking what was wrong. Cheryl responded firmly, stating that she believed he knew exactly what was happening. Clay asserted he didn't know where Jackie was and mentioned he would instruct her to call Cheryl when he saw her. However, Cheryl wasn't convinced. She took her sister's children to their parents at a house and filed a police report personally. Despite initial skepticism about Clay's involvement in Jackie's disappearance, the detectives took her concerns seriously. They didn't make her wait for 24 hours before investigating further. Instead, they proceeded to contact Jackie's ex-husband for any leads on her whereabouts. When questioned, 41-year-old Clay informed them that he had lunch with Jackie. They subsequently went to the attorney's office to discuss some aspects of their divorce, and then drove together to his house for further discussions. He claimed that after chatting for a while, he left for the store. Upon his return, Jackie's car was gone. He assumed she had departed. Clay added that his son, Maddox, was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and insisted Jackie was aware of it. According to him, Jackie wasn't there for her son, but merely to talk about other matters with Clay. However, Cheryl found his statements implausible and inconsistent with what she knew. Jackie made it known that her visit to Clay's house was solely for seeing her son. She had no intention of discussing anything else with him, especially given that she wouldn't have allowed her son to be far away with another woman. Noting these discrepancies, Cheryl managed to convince the investigators that Clay's account lacked credibility and suggested he might be concealing crucial information about Jackie's disappearance. In light of this new perspective provided by Cheryl, investigators were now treating the case more urgently as both the missing person and her car remained unaccounted for. A comprehensive search was launched for Jackie a few hours after her disappearance. Investigators her Honda Pilot on an interstate highway with a flat tire. There were no signs of an accident. The tire appeared punctured intentionally, making the scene look staged. The car was open and empty, with a few blood stains on the back seat, but no other clues indicating her whereabouts. These disturbing details hinted at a possible attack and kidnapping. The search effort for Jackie was concentrated in the vicinity where her car was found. Numerous volunteers, including police officers, rescue squads with dogs, and family members participated in the search. They came from various parts of the region responding to requests from Jackie's relatives. Despite the unbearable heat, many were willing to help locate her. Jackie's family announced a reward of $3,500 for information about her whereabouts. Despite their efforts, including extensive searches and public appeals for assistance, the search yielded no results for several days. Police began to scrutinize Clay, Jackie's ex-husband, more closely. When they visited his house to speak with him again, he recounted the same story as before, but refused access to his home and car. He promptly hired a lawyer who asserted his rights. For days after Jackie's disappearance, left her a voicemail with a distressed tone. "Hi honey, it's Sunday. You went missing on Wednesday. Please call me if you get this message. I don't know where you are and I miss you very much." Detectives later obtained a search warrant and returned to Clay's residence for a thorough inspection. During this inspection, they discovered blood-like stains in his vehicle. Forensic analysis revealed it was fish blood. Clay had deliberately coated the car with fish blood and recorded it on video as a test for forensic experts. In addition to examining the vehicle, investigators noted conspicuous details in Clay's house. A section of carpet had been removed from the floor, leaving an obvious mark. Tiny drops of blood were also found on the walls of the hallway leading to the basement. These findings raised further questions about Clay's involvement and intentions regarding Jackie's disappearance. Traces of furniture rearrangement were evident, signaling that something unusual was happening in the house. Forensics examined under the floorboards and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood samples from the house and the carpet were sent to the laboratory for further examination. Detectives tracked the missing woman's last known movements to 1:10 a.m. She was observed at a drugstore with her ex-husband. The pair appeared composed and normal. Approximately 2 hours later, she was seen at an ATM withdrawing money. After that, Jackie did not reappear on CCTV. Although Clay was seen a few hours later with his son and new girlfriend at a toy store. Subsequently, they visited a car wash in their pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. By then, had changed clothes and meticulously washed both the car and the boat. This increased suspicion around him, establishing him as the prime suspect. Investigators released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, requesting eyewitnesses who may have seen them. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River. In response to this request, detectives confirmed this information through an analysis of Clay's cell phone billing records, prompting them to focus search efforts in that area. Despite numerous searches over the large terrain, nothing surfaced directly linking to the missing woman. The forensic results soon arrived, indicating that the drops of blood found in Clay's house indeed belonged to Jackie. The police then operated under the assumption that Jackie was deceased. Detectives called Clay in for questioning and attempted to procure a confession from him regarding Jackie's murder. However, Clay denied all accusations, stating that the blood stains were remnants of an old domestic incident in his kitchen. Without physical remains or definitive proof of death, investigators lacked grounds to arrest or charge him. Despite releasing him from custody, authorities kept Clay under close surveillance and continued their investigation. Being an ex-deputy sheriff himself, knew they were monitoring him closely and engaged in deceptive maneuvers to elude detection, effectively playing cat and mouse with law enforcement officials. He'd go to deserted vacant lots to mislead the investigation while the entire neighborhood stood by and participated in the search for the missing mother of 3. Clay continued to bully and taunt them. He would drive past the search party or Jackie's family, insult them, give them the middle finger and shout that they were wasting their time and wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more suspicions and questions. Meanwhile, the missing woman's sister Cheryl fought in court for custody of the triplets. She feared the children would go to a father who was a danger. His erratic behavior backfired on him and Cheryl got custody. This enraged him and he began threatening his ex-wife's sister with violence, including writing about it on social media. The woman recorded these threats and contacted police. Detectives seized the opportunity and arrested Clay nearly 5 months after Jackie's disappearance. He was charged with threats to life, which he accepted, but claimed he wrote out of anger and despair at losing custody of his beloved children. Clay insisted he didn't plan anything bad against Cheryl. He viewed himself as a victim in this situation. While investigating this incident with his sister, police found out he had other charges pending against him, stealing $50,000 from a previous employer as well as stalking a man. Detectives pressed his former co-worker, hoping Clay would confess to killing his ex-wife and lead them to her body, but it was futile. Clayton continued to deny all charges regarding Jackie's disappearance. Instead of confessing to the crime, he started claiming confidently that he knew who was behind his ex-wife's death, a man named Harry. But detectives had already checked this lead thoroughly. Harry had an ironclad alibi that eliminated him from suspicion. All evidence pointed only to Clay, yet he kept denying it. He ended up going to prison for 5 years for threatening Cheryl. While the police locked him up in jail, they continued to investigate Jackie's disappearance. The search for the missing woman continued on Devil's Island, but never yielded any results. Eventually, about 2 years after Jackie's disappearance, the cops gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence, video camera footage, blood in his house, and more. They decided to charge Clay with his ex-wife's murder, even without her body. It was a risky and desperate move because if they lost, the prosecutor's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. After consulting with his accomplices, Clay concluded that it would be best for them to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce the sentence. To do so, the defendant offered to plead guilty to the murder and provide the location of the body. Jackie's family agreed to this deal because it was important to give her a decent burial. Clay led police officers to his ex-wife's body. It was in a secluded spot on a remote sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. At first, he couldn't remember exactly which tree he had buried her under, but then admitted that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her body. One of the policemen, who was an active gardener, explained that large quantities of fertilizer kill trees. They looked around and found 3 dead trees that were of interest to them. They excavated there, and under one of the trees they did find Jackie's body wearing the same clothes she had last been seen in. The woman was identified from dental records as Jackie Waller. Finally, Jackie's loved ones recognized that she was definitely dead and found her body. Then they were able to commit her to the ground. The woman's funeral was held on her parents' golden wedding day. Cheryl told their children that their mom was gone and she had been killed. Father. This event was a great shock to the children because they lost both their mother and father at once. The children developed a deep aversion to Clay and refused to communicate with him henceforth. As part of the agreement, Clay had to officially confess to the murder of his ex-wife and provide specific details. He explained that the initial thoughts of murder began to surface about a year before the tragic event, when Jackie announced their separation. Despite this, he tried to suppress those dark thoughts, as Jackie was the mother of his children. However, he couldn't bear the idea of her taking his children away. He warned Jackie that such actions would have dire consequences for her, but she didn't heed his warning, which he considered her fault. The night prior to the murder, Clay traveled to a secluded area on Devil's Island to dig a grave for Jackie. According to him, their divorce proceedings were generally progressing smoothly. On that particular day, after a visit to their lawyer, they had a conversation in which she suggested they engage in intimacy one last time. They then went back to his home where they talked in the kitchen. While looking for a snack in the refrigerator, Clay accidentally raised his head, hitting Jackie and causing her nose to bleed. This incident angered her. She stormed out into the hallway where she smeared blood on the walls and started yelling at him that he would never see his children again. At this point, Clay lost control and attacked her. He hit her in the face with his hand and then strangled her. Subsequently, he took Jackie's body out in a dumpster and buried it in the pre-dug grave. Afterward, he meticulously cleaned out both the car and house, took a shower, changed clothes as if nothing happened, and then went on to meet his new girlfriend and son at a toy store. Throughout this process, claimed that everything was driven by impulse and emotion. He did not originally intend to kill Jackie. This contradicted his earlier statement, claiming he had dug the grave the day before. However, if Clay did not plan to kill the woman, why would he have dug the grave beforehand? It appeared to be premeditated murder. The medical examiner found multiple skull fractures on the deceased, indicating blunt force rather than a simple beating with fists. No one believed his story. Clay, who showed no remorse for killing his ex-wife, felt jubilant at receiving only 20 years in prison for second-degree murder, with the possibility of early release. The prosecutor had another strategy. Clay's testimony about digging the grave buried him further. He had dug the hole in Illinois while the murder occurred in Missouri. These actions fell under the federal law against domestic violence across state lines, and their violation allowed an additional 35 years to be added to his sentence. Clay Waller will be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. It turned out that Clay was unaware of such a law and did not foresee the consequences of his confession. Yet, his atrocities continued. Demonstrating further callousness, he wrote a book detailing Jackie's murder to profit from the tragedy. Cheryl, Jackie's sister, along with her husband, continues to raise Jackie's children with support from their elderly parents. The children have grown up remembering their mother as an exceptional person who remains forever in their hearts. They still harbor anger toward their father and deeply miss their mom. Holly's case appeared in the distant past on the vast timeline of history, breaking through the formerly impenetrable veil of obscurity. She is the lost daughter who has now been found. Holly's discovery, however, brought up even more questions than it did solutions. Where has Holly been for the past 4 decades, and who killed her parents, Harold and Tina? We go back in time to a chilly winter day on January 12, 1981, in the vast wilderness of northern Harris County, Texas, just outside the bustling boundaries of Houston City. That day, a civilian's dog decided to venture out into the arid woods, only to return with the terrifying remains of a human arm in its jaw. The skin was rotting, telling a terrible story about what was concealed among the dense vegetation. The frantic search that followed this grisly discovery revealed a dark secret concealed in the dense forest close to Wallaceville Road. As the sun bounced off the tall trees, it created an erratic pattern of shadows that deceived the eye. The only sound in the silent, desolate woods came from the skeleton leaves being crunched under the civilian foot, and the dog's poo. The sound of the dog barking in the distance broke the stillness of the woods. The perplexing dog worked furiously to unearth something from a heap beneath a massive old tree. The civilian observed the dog's frenzied excitement. Intense anticipation, its tail whipped from side to side. The civilian felt shivers run through his soul as he came to a terrifying realization. Beneath the deceiving covering of fallen leaves was a shallow grave harboring the grim death of two bodies, interlaced and neatly placed beside each other. The gravity of this gruesome discovery weighed heavily on the civilian's mind. He ran recklessly in the direction of the closest phone booth and dialed 911. Because of the shock of the discovery, his voice was trembling as he spoke to the operator at the other end of the line. The couple's decayed bodies lied in the dark green area, only a few feet apart. Their bodies tragically bore the impact of time, giving in to decay and wearing away. This stipulated that they had been dead for a couple of months. Both bodies had been concealed in the woods just 100 yards from Wallaceville Road. When investigators arrived on the scene, they were looking for any hints that might help them determine who the deceased were. They came across a horrifying scene. They identified the first body to be a young woman between the ages of 15 and 25. She was between 5 feet 4 inches and 5 feet 9 inches tall. She was white with possible Native American blend. Her body was found close to a pair of green running shorts, and she had long reddish-brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. The woman had been choked to death. She was covered in a bloody towel and was otherwise naked. Although no additional clothing was discovered at the scene, detectives noted that the woman probably had a gap in her teeth and had short, stubby nails. A young man's body believed to be between 20 and 30 years old lay next to her, though it was possible that he was as young as 15, since it was in the 1980s. They did not have the same forensic advancements that exist today. He was between 5 feet 4 and 5 feet tall. He was white and had brown hair and eyes. The man's neck showed signs of degeneration in the upper vertebrae, which may have been caused by a previous injury. He had prominent eyebrows and his wisdom teeth had either been extracted or had not yet fully developed, according to the investigators. The victim had been beaten to death after being stripped, bound, and ganged. Investigators in Harris County were left with many unanswered questions following the shocking discovery of these two young people. Who were these people and what circumstances led to their tragic end? Investigators hoped to be able to solve this mystery as they continued to piece together the available evidence. As if the discovery of the two decaying bodies in these woods wasn't terrifying enough, the neighborhood was shocked when a third body was found there 18 months later. This time, it was the body of 15-year-old Michelle Garvey, who had been missing for a month. Michelle had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her life was violently taken away from her in a cruel manner. It was obvious that Michelle's body had been there for some time when investigators arrived at the scene, because neither shoes nor a bra were to be found. The mystery surrounding the tragic deaths of these young people was further complicated by the fact that Michelle's body was found in the exact same location as the earlier discovered bodies. This only increased the sense of unease in the neighborhood as many people began to wonder if there was a link between Michelle's death and the deaths of the two previously found bodies. The task ahead of them was daunting, but investigators were determined to find the answers to the numerous questions that remained after these shocking revelations. The other two bodies that were discovered before Michelle's were not immediately identified, but Michelle was. To reconstruct the couple found in the woods, forensic artist Mary Mace was hired to do the job, in the hopes that someone would come forward with information about their identities. The reconstruction was widely disseminated, but no one came forward with any helpful leads. The investigators had to file the case away as unsolved because there were so few clues to continue with the investigation. 30 years later, in 2011, it was decided to exhume the bodies of the unidentified couple in order to gather DNA samples. This resulted in yet another dead end, and the investigation was closed. Then, in January 2022, new information was discovered in a twist that nobody anticipated. The case of the unidentified couple discovered in the Houston woods has finally made some headway after 41 long years of unsolved mysteries. In 2022, the challenging task of identifying the two bodies was assigned to forensic scientist Allison Peacock of FHD Forensics. She and her team got to work, entering the DNA data into the National Database of Genetic Profiles called GeneMatch. They were shocked to learn of a match to the male victim's cousin who lived in Kentucky. After getting in touch with him, they finally were able to identify the two people who had been discovered buried in the woods as 17-year-old Tina Gail Klaus, formerly known as Tina Galen, and her husband, 21-year-old Harold Dean Klaus. The year 1978 saw a destined meeting of Harold Dean Klaus Jr. and Tina Galen in the blissful Florida community of New Smyrna Beach, when she was only 15. Young Tina found herself drawn to the slightly older Harold Dean, who was 19 years old at the time. In an ironic turn of events, their families were already intertwined because Tina's brother and Harold's sister had started a relationship of their own. Harold and Tina were caught up in a whirlwind of romance that picked them up and carried them quickly to the Volusia County Courthouse under Florida's colorful skies. They exchanged marriage vows there on June 25, 1979, cementing their ardent love. The birth of Holly Marie Klaus on January 24, 1980, was a sign of their ardent love and dedication to one another. Despite being young, Harold and Tina were admired by their friends and family for their unwavering commitment to parenthood. As the 1980s began to take shape, Harold and Tina bid a fond farewell to the well-known Florida shores. They focused their attention on a new life and ventured into the sweltering heat of Louisville, Texas, a developing suburb buzzing with the promise of prosperity. Harold, a master woodworker who lived in the vibrant energy of the Dallas metropolitan area, had his sights set on taking advantage of the construction boom that swept the area in the early 1980s. The couple had high hopes for a prosperous future in the Texan trade industry thanks to Harold's skills as a skilled cabinet maker. According to their devoted relatives back home, their relationship remained without a scratch. There were no arguments or tensions. The couple's relationship appeared to be hooded by a perfect harmony. They kept their loved ones informed of their Texan journey through regular phone calls. However, in October 1980, as the autumn leaves started to fall, an unsettling silence soon descended upon the familial phone lines connecting Harold and Tina with their families. The happy chatter suddenly stopped, leaving a jarring silence with a sinister air of mystery. It was unknown what had happened to the couple in the months that had followed. Their killer or killers as well was still a mystery. But perhaps the investigators would finally be able to learn the truth since their identities were finally established. Their demise is thought to have taken place between October 1980 and January 1981. When Alice and Peacock contacted the families, Harold's mother provided them with their first tip. She explained that toward the end of December 1980, a sister named Susan called to let them know that Tina and Harold had joined their little religious community and no longer desired to communicate with their families. Sister Susan then requested $1,000 to transport the couple's car, a red 1978 AMC Concorde, back to Florida as part of the group's requirements for joining. Clearly concerned for Harold and Tina's safety, the family made the decision to call the police. They were instructed by the police to indulge Susan. Finally, a man and two women showed up at the racetrack Daytona in Florida to receive $1,000 in exchange for the car. The three people were immediately detained by police as soon as the family received the car. At the time, a police report was made for this operation. Unfortunately, the 1980 police report has not yet been located, which poses a serious obstacle for the investigation. When Harold's sister brought up the missing baby during the same conversation, Allison's heart sank. In their investigation, that particular detail had never surfaced. There had already been so many twists and turns in the case, and now there might be a missing child. After taking a deep breath, Allison made a promise to Harold's sister that they would do everything possible to discover what had happened to the baby. Allison learned that Harold and Tina did indeed have a child as she investigated the situation further. A kid called Holly Klaus. When her parents disappeared, she was only a few months old, and she was never seen or heard from again. Allison was adamant about learning what had become of Holly, but it seemed like an overwhelming task. Investigators began a thorough national search for Holly because they were driven to learn the truth. But they had to first figure out how to spell her name. Although some detectives dismissed it as a minor problem, Allison Peacock knew that getting the name correct was essential to locating her. Allison and Harold's sister asked for access to her birth record from Florida's Department of Vital Records to determine the proper spelling, but they were turned down. This started a difficult and uphill battle, in which the authorities rejected each request for the record. Peacock and her group, though, were unyielding. Before eventually receiving access to Holly's birth certificate, investigators worked their way up the ranks of those involved in the case, from detectives to senior prosecutors, judges, and finally, attorney generals from 3 different states. They soon learned that Holly had been adopted by a family nearby. She had grown up and was going about her life, completely oblivious to her disastrous past. Holly's birth certificate was sealed in the United States, which is why it was difficult to obtain. Following an adoption, it is common practice to seal birth certificates, making it challenging to obtain a copy of the record, except through a court order. This also implies that the birth certificate is accompanied by an adoption certificate. It was Alison Peacock's unwavering persistence in locating Holly's name's proper spelling that allowed for the eventual acquisition of the birth certificate. Whether it was merely a coincidence or a deliberate action is unknown. But the truth is that Holly might not have been found without Alison's commendable efforts. After this discovery, the police descended on Holly's workplace and learned her origin story, which they had painstakingly uncovered from a maze of lost paperwork and neglected archives. Holly, Harold and Tina's daughter, who is now 42 and a mother of 5 who lives in Oklahoma, was finally reunited with her remaining biological family as the investigators continued to delve deeper into the mysterious case of Harold and Tina. Everyone involved was happy and relieved because they had long given up on ever finding her. But there are still many unanswered questions about the circumstances surrounding her adoption. The case was far from over, despite the excitement of the moment. Holly's parents were murdered, and the identity of the murderer is still a mystery, as are the circumstances surrounding Holly's adoption. Investigators soon found out that 2 women who belonged to a nomadic religious group had left Holly at a church in Arizona. These women were barefoot and wore robes. Their religion remained a mystery because the officials were reluctant to provide any information. However, they did reveal that the group believed in veganism and thought that men and women should be kept apart. The religious group is known to have visited Arizona, California, and possibly Texas while touring the southern United States. The group was reportedly seen in the early 1980s around Yuma, Arizona, with its female members begging for food. The case appeared to have all the elements of a classic detective story. With plenty of leads to pursue but no obvious solutions, Holly's amazing discovery had only raised more issues and led to dead ends. With no clear solution in sight, Holly's extraordinary discovery had untangled a thread that led down a maze of questions. Her complicated adoption history started to come into focus as the murky role of a roving religious sect became clear. Detectives nevertheless reaffirmed their dedication to the investigation, strengthened by their belief that the religious organization was the key to cracking this unsolved case. They showed firm commitment to uncovering the truth in order to bring Holly and her biological roots some form of justice. We are faced with an unknown that is full of enticing secrets that are just waiting to be revealed. We wait for shocking revelations, the echoes of the past growing louder with each passing moment. This investigation into the history of the mysterious and unsolved has only just begun, so there is still much to learn. On June 15, 2023, Chad Dorman returned home early from work and requested that his 3 sons and wife join him in the primary bedroom for a nap. Sometime after they lay down on the bed, Dorman opened his gun safe and retrieved a rifle. Dorman then shot Hunter twice, killing him. His wife began trying to help Hunter while telling the other 2 sons to run. At this point, the stepdaughter, who was watching television, was entering the bedroom and witnessed the first shots. She ran after Clayton, telling him to keep running. Dorman chased him into a nearby field, shot him from behind, and then point blank in the head. The suspect carried Clayton's body back to the house's yard. The stepdaughter then re-entered the house, picked up Chase, and escaped to the road. Dorman followed her and aimed the rifle at her, telling her to put Chase down. He tried to fire but was out of ammunition. Chase ran to his mother, who was now outside in the yard trying to render aid to Clayton. The stepdaughter got away and informed a passerby what her stepfather was doing before continuing to run towards the nearby Monroe Township Fire Department. Dorman then went inside and carried Hunter's body outside, laying him in the yard. He then tried to wrestle Chase from his wife, reportedly biting her in the process. When she managed to grab the rifle, Dorman fired, shooting his wife in the thumb. She dropped Chase, whom Dorman then shot in the head. Dorman then laid Chase's body down next to his brother's and sat on the side stoop of the house, watching his wife try to resuscitate the boys until police arrived at 4:25 p.m. Chad Dorman was born in 1990 in Ohio, USA, and was the cherished only child of Kit and Gloria Dorman. From the start, he was the apple of their eye. Chad had what you'd call a normal childhood. His family was middle class, so he managed to get through elementary and high school without any major issues. He wasn't exactly a standout student, but he got by, passing his classes and staying out of trouble. However, things took a turn once Chad hit adulthood. He started drinking heavily and driving recklessly, which led to numerous traffic tickets and fines. At one point, he even crashed his car and fled the scene, ignoring multiple court summons. The real wake-up call came in 2010 when Chad was accused of domestic violence against his own father. Despite the charges, his father refused to testify against him, not wanting to see his son in trouble, so the case was dismissed. But history repeated itself, as Chad faced another domestic violence accusation, this time from a partner. Like before, the case went nowhere because no one would support the charges, holding on to hope that Chad would change. And change he did, at least for a while after meeting Laura. He fell head over heels for her. Unfazed by her having a daughter, Alexis, from a previous marriage, they soon started a life together, moving to a residential neighborhood in Monroe, Claremont County. The family grew with the arrival of 3 sons, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase. By early 2023, Chad was 32, Laura was 34, Alexis was 16, and the boys were 7, 4, and 3 years old, respectively. The Dormans settled nicely into their peaceful community. In their free time, Clayton and Hunter loved playing baseball. Their coach really liked them and always talked about how energetic and happy they were during practice. He described Hunter as a natural prankster and Clayton as the more serious one, always focused on getting the plays right and cheering on the team. Though both boys shared a love for sports, their other interests varied. Clayton enjoyed building with Lego, riding his go-kart, playing with his dog, and especially taking care of his younger brothers. Hunter, the more adventurous one, was often found playing in the yard, splashing in the creek, or bouncing on the trampoline, always showing lots of affection. Every day, he would tell his mom and sister how much he loved them. Even though Chase was very young, he had already shown a vivid imagination, spending most of his day pretending to be a superhero. The rest of the time, he was glued to Laura, sharing a special bond. The community often spoke of how close the Dorman family was, amazed by their strong connection and shared moments. Yet, behind closed doors, things were quite different. Neighbors frequently heard Chad yelling at Laura and the kids, with hardly a day passing without some outburst. Close friends noticed the situation deteriorating, describing Chad as a ticking time bomb. The abuse escalated to the point where Laura threatened to leave. Despite the turmoil at home, Chad tried to keep up appearances publicly. In June 2023, he updated his Facebook profile picture to one featuring the 3 kids and followed up with more posts, including one from the baseball field where Clayton, Hunter, and Chase gave thumbs up, suggesting all was well. At the time, the photo raised no alarms and seemed to depict a happy family scene. Those aware of Chad's abusive behavior chose not to intervene, hoping the family situation was improving. On Wednesday, the 14th of the month, the kids had a baseball game. Chad, Laura, and Chase came to support them. After the game, the head of New Richmond Sports Association noticed Chad interacting with the kids, instructing them to get into their car seats, seemingly caring and responsible, which left no suspicion about his true nature. Unbeknownst to everyone, that would be the last time the children were seen alive. The next day, Chad came home early from work and asked his wife and children to join him in the master bedroom for a nap. While the rest of the family was sleeping in the master bedroom, Chad's 16-year-old stepdaughter was watching television in the family room. Once they were all asleep, Chad opened his nightstand drawer, revealing a safe from which he retrieved a rifle. He woke the 3 children and lined them up with Hunter in front. What followed was a horrifying tragedy. Dorman shot Hunter twice, killing him. Laura was awakened by the noise and started screaming in horror. She rushed to Hunter's side and urged her other 2 sons to run. Meanwhile, Alexis, in the next room watching TV, heard the gunshots and ran into the bedroom. She saw her stepfather chasing Clayton and started running after them. The boy raced to a nearby field, but despite his speed, Chad caught up with him, treating it like a hunt. He then shot the boy as he ran, causing him to fall and allowing more time to shoot him again at close range. He then carried the lifeless body back to the house. After witnessing this, Alexis rushed inside to grab Chase, hoping to save him. Her plan was to head for the nearest road, but they never made it out of the house because Chad caught up again. He told Alexis to put down Chase, but she refused. Chad tried to shoot, but the gun clicked, empty of bullets. Just then, Laura appeared in the yard, trying desperately to revive Clayton but to no avail. Alexis put Chase down, telling him to run to their mother, saying she would go for help. The little boy ran to Laura's arms for safety. Meanwhile, Chad went back inside to reload his gun and came back to grab his son Hunter. After leaving Hunter in the yard, he tried to snatch Chase from Laura. They struggled, and Chad bit Laura's hand before shooting her in the same spot. She dropped Chase and Chad took him. He then shot the boy in the head. Satisfied with his actions, Chad placed Chase beside his brothers and sat on the side porch, sinisterly watching as his wife tried in vain to revive the children. It was 4:14 p.m. when Laura realized there was nothing more she could do. She called the police, hysterically screaming that she had lost her babies. The father had fired 9 shots. One boy was shot once and the other 2 were each shot 4 times. Meanwhile, Alexis was running towards the Monroe fire station, screaming for help. A neighbor driving by stopped to ask what had happened. Alexis told her that her stepfather had killed everyone at home. The neighbor offered to take her in the car, but Alexis refused, saying she couldn't leave her family behind and continued running towards the fire station. The neighbor parked and called the police, recounting Alexis' story. When asked if she could check on the house, she said she didn't want to get close, fearing she might be shot too. By this time, 911 operators had received 2 calls about the incident and had alerted the officers who rushed to the Dorman residence. The neighbors, having heard the shots, were in their yards trying to see what had happened, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. At 4:30 p.m., the police arrived at the scene. They found Chad calmly sitting on a step outside, rifle in hand, soberly stating he wasn't going to resist arrest and admitting to the crimes, insisting they take him to jail. In this gripping footage from the police body camera, we witness the moment law enforcement apprehends Chad Dorman. The scene unfolds with palpable tension as officers approach, capturing the crucial interaction that led to his arrest. Despite the calm exterior he presents, the gravity of the situation is evident. While Chad was detained, the immediate focus shifted to the 3 children who were found lying in the yard with gunshot wounds. Paramedics tried to perform CPR, but to no avail. Within minutes, the tragic deaths of the children were confirmed. Attention then turned to Laura, who had a gunshot wound to her hand, not life-threatening. She was rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, screaming at Chad that he had destroyed her life as she was loaded into the ambulance. Chad was arrested smoothly, but as he was about to be placed in the patrol car, he bizarrely warned the arresting officers about the family dog and told the pet to go back inside the house. The property was cordoned off with yellow tape as officers planned to return the next day for a thorough investigation. That night, Chad was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. When investigators returned to the house the next morning, they found no signs of forced entry, indicating Chad acted alone. In his initial statement, Chad chillingly admitted to having planned the attack on his children since the previous October and revealed he hadn't slept for 3 days leading up to the crime, tormented by the thought of killing his children. On June 16th, Chad made his first court appearance, wearing a padded green vest designed to prevent self-harm, flanked by 6 deputies, indicating concerns he might become unruly. During the hearing, he admitted to lining up his 3 children before killing them. Neighbors' testimonies were presented, with one witnessing Clayton's attempt to escape from Chad. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Chad's guilt. His defense requested a $75,000 bail, arguing his long-standing relationship with Laura, lack of stable employment, and community ties made him a low flight risk. However, prosecutors demanded a $20 million bail, a record high amount in Ohio, effectively ensuring Chad could not be released. The judge agreed with the prosecution. The criminal division of the Claremont County Prosecutor's Office expressed that this was the worst crime he had encountered, condemning Chad's betrayal of his children's trust and need for protection, love, and guidance. He highlighted the brutality of Chad's actions, particularly when he hunted down Clayton. He also criticized the community for ignoring Chad's violent tendencies. The hearing concluded with Chad facing 9 counts of aggravated murder, 1 for each shot fired at his children, plus 8 counts of kidnapping and 4 counts of assault. He was remanded to Claremont County Jail as the investigation continued. On June 23rd, a grand jury indicted Chad on 21 counts, stirring outrage when he pleaded not guilty. Claremont County's prosecutor mentioned that the aggravated murder charges could lead to the death penalty. He argued for the elimination of bail, claiming no sum could match the atrocity of the crime. The case had already garnered extensive media attention, with crowds outside the courthouse demanding swift justice and calling for severe punishment for Chad. Public opinion varied after the hearing. Some agreed with the prosecutor's stance on the death penalty, while others advocated for life imprisonment, insisting Chad fully face the consequences of his actions. However, the consensus was clear. Chad deserved severe punishment. Despite the nationwide backlash, Chad's father still supported him, expressing shock and sorrow in an interview, attempting to rationalize his son's actions as a sudden madness, contradicting Chad's admission of premeditated planning. In contrast, Laura and her family grappled with the fallout. Alexis needed psychological support due to the trauma, and Rachel, the children's aunt, initiated a GoFundMe campaign to cover funeral expenses. She expressed that while the trial might convict Chad, it wouldn't mend their broken hearts, leaving them only memories of the joyful children they once had. On June 25th, the New Richmond Sports Association held a vigil at the baseball field, selling t-shirts to aid Laura's family. Community members visited the Dorman home, leaving toys, candles, and flowers in tribute to the children. A service was held on June 26th at the First Baptist Church for the kids. Laura asked everyone to wear bright, colorful clothes to remember her sons happily. But even with the cheerful colors, you could feel the deep sadness, especially with their friends who just couldn't make sense of the terrible event. During the service, the coach spoke, emphasizing the irreplaceable time spent with the boys and cherishing every moment shared with them. On September 22nd, a pre-trial hearing for Chad was held, setting the trial date for July 8, 2024, expected to last until August 12th of the same year. It was decided that Chad would remain in custody at the Claremont County Jail, with his bail set at $20 million. To this day, the motive behind the crime remains a mystery. No one knows what truly drove Chad to kill his 3 children. Some media suggest he might have been seeking revenge against Laura, who planned to leave him due to his violent behavior towards her and the children. However, Chad has not addressed this theory and continues to withhold cooperation with the investigation. In February 2024, during a court session, Chad Dorman's lawyers requested the judge to dismiss the statements Chad made during his questioning due to certain legal problems and violations. The judge agreed and decided not to consider the confessions Chad made to the police, where he admitted to killing his 3 sons. The judge believed that Chad's rights were not respected after he was arrested. The case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in the family. Despite the fact that she grew up in love and affluence, she was not pampered. Her parents came from simple families. Nevertheless, her father Thomas managed to achieve considerable heights. He created his own company which was engaged in computers earned funds. The man was happy to spend on his favorite daughter and her desires. When Kimberly was a little girl, her parents divorced. The child was left to live with her mother. However, this did not weaken the connection between the little girl and her father. He took her on weekends and spent all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man, decided to move to Florida. She faced a choice to stay with her mother or with her father. Since she didn't want to move, the young lady decided to live with her father. Kimberly was very close to her father and enjoyed living with him. As she grew up, she became a well-behaved, sociable child and eventually a stunning young woman with a radiant smile that always lifted her spirits. She had a great sense of humor and a positive attitude. Kimberly was raised in a sheltered environment, surrounded by love and care, which protected her from the harsh realities of life. As a result, she only saw the good in people and was largely unaware of the darker aspects of life. Unfortunately, her open and kind nature would eventually lead to many sorrows. In 1994, Kimberly enrolled at the College of Staten Island. Shortly after, she told her father that she felt ready to live on her own. Although Mr. Kimberly was worried about her decision, he respected her independence and decided not to oppose it. He promised himself that he would do his best to ensure her safety and well-being in her new living arrangements. Kimberly bought a nice apartment for his daughter, located in a wealthy area of the city, and installed an alarm system to ensure her safety. He also purchased a parking space in the garage across the street so she wouldn't have to park far away. To stay in touch, he provided her with a cell phone and a pager. Kimberly did everything in his power to ensure his daughter's well-being. His concerns for her safety were well-founded, given his wealth and her limited life experience. Kimberly was a diligent student who also worked part-time as an accountant at a reputable firm. She had declined her father's offer to join the family business, opting instead to forge her own path. Kimberly led a typical student life, attending parties and socializing with friends. She declined her father's offers to return home, wanting to maintain independence. This led to an unexpected situation when she let friend Liz Pace and her family stay while their apartment was being renovated in early 1995. Kimberly, with a kind heart, invited young people to her lodging. They spent days having fun together. One day, Kimberly and a friend attended a party, getting ready and dressing up. After a fun night of dancing, Kimberly drove them home but didn't go up, citing unfinished business. They hugged goodbye, unaware they'd never see each other again. After visiting the police, Mr. Kimberly's father, went to the parking lot next to her house, only to find that her car was missing from the garage. As he looked around, he spotted a shiny object on the floor near the wall, a small gold earring. He recalled giving his daughter similar earrings and, just in case, picked it up. However, Kimberly was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Instead, he met her guests, including a friend, her boyfriend Joshua Torres, and their 2-year-old child. Although Kimberly was aware of Kimberly's decision, he didn't agree with it. The tenants were worried about the hostess' absence and Joshua offered to help find her. He said he was looking for Kimberly and would assist later. Kimberly returned to the police station, explaining that his daughter had been in an accident, but the officers remained unconvinced. Kimberly decided to speak with Liz Pace, the last person to see Kimberly, and showed her the jewelry he had found. Liz Pace confirmed that she had seen Kimberly wearing those earrings on the night she disappeared. Kimberly then visited the places his daughter frequently went to, talking to many people, but didn't gather any significant information. Joshua suggested searching not only for Kimberly but also for her distinctive car. Kimberly went to the police station for the 3rd time, insisting that he wouldn't leave until they began a search. A detective eventually responded to his appeal, agreeing to take on the investigation despite the usual protocol. To better understand the events surrounding Kimberly Antinoco's investigators started by reconstructing her activities on February 28th. Kimberly began the day by attending college, followed by a few hours of work. After work, she returned home and had dinner with friends before heading out to a party with a friend named Liz Pace. The evening concluded with their return home around 4 a.m. Following her return, Kimberly went to the parking lot for reasons that remain unclear. Both her apartment and garage were thoroughly searched, but no signs of struggle or foreign fingerprints were found. This lack of evidence suggested either a meticulous cleanup or that any potential intruder may have worn gloves. The most puzzling aspect was the disappearance of Kimberly and her car without any trace, except for a single earring that was found. An analysis of Kimberly's bank account revealed that her last transaction occurred the evening before she vanished, ruling out the possibility that she had run away from home. Based on the evidence, detectives hypothesized that Kimberly was likely kidnapped. The investigation expanded to include additional police officers. Due to the lack of concrete leads, law enforcement considered information from a psychic. Witness interviews began with Liz Pace and Joshua. They revealed 65 calls were made from Kimberly's landline on March 1st. Joshua explained he made these calls to locate Kimberly, who was like a little sister to him. Liz Pace's testimony helped determine Kimberly's clothing in a portrait was created, highlighting her distinctive tattoos, including a scorpion and infinity sign. Meanwhile, a search for the missing car was underway with checks at scrap metal collection points and other locations where the vehicle might be found. Unfortunately, no positive results were obtained. A check of Kimberly's cell phone was also unsuccessful. Police advised Kimberly to pay attention to any letters or phone calls he received, as they might be from Kimberly's kidnappers demanding a ransom. The Kimberly family remained in a state of uncertainty until March 4th. At approximately 2 a.m., emergency services responded to a reported fire at a large, abandoned house located at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Multiple fire crews battled the blaze until it was finally extinguished. Upon investigation, a charred body was discovered in the basement of the building. Further analysis by forensic experts revealed the deceased was a woman between 20 to 25 years old, with remnants of long, black hair still intact. There were also signs of tape and evidence that her legs had been bound, with her hands tied behind her back. The most disturbing aspect, however, was that she was alive at the time of the fire as indicated by the presence of smoke in her lungs. Detectives initially suspected that the body might belong to Kimberly, a missing person. To confirm the identity, dental records were required. Meanwhile, an inspection of the ashes and the air revealed the scent of gasoline, strongly suggesting that the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence of a serious crime. Despite the absence of other evidence, the charred body remained, and upon closer examination, specialists found tattoos matching the description of the missing woman. The records from the dental clinic supported the investigation's suspicions, leading to the discovery of Kimberly Antoniakis' body. As more details emerged, an eyewitness came forward who often walked his dog in the area. The dog had been acting strangely in the days prior to the fire, appearing nervous and barking at the house for no apparent reason. It wasn't until after the fire and the discovery of the body that the cause of the dog's behavior became clear. She had attempted to escape and called for help, but her cries went unheard by humans. However, the dog's acute hearing allowed it to detect the sounds coming from the basement, explaining its unusual behavior. When questioned by officers, the homeowner revealed that he had visited the building multiple times in recent days. He was trying to sell the house and would regularly check on its condition, collect mail, and pick up receipts. However, he only inspected the house from the outside and never went into the basement. The homeowner claimed he never heard any suspicious noises, and if he had, he would have investigated. Investigators decided to re-question Joshua, as they had some reservations about him. They also found it strangely coincidental that his name started with the letter J. This time, Joshua mentioned a person he hadn't been able to contact the day Kimberly went missing. A young man nicknamed Psycho, a Russian national who had previously dated Kimberly. The detectives looked into this new information and discovered that the Russian had moved to the US with his parents at a young age. As he grew older, he became involved with a gang and had a history of breaking the law. This led to the identification of the first suspect, who was soon taken into custody. During interrogation, Psycho was informed of his former lover's death, but his reaction shocked the detectives. The young man not only denied involvement in the crime, but he also showed genuine emotional distress. Investigators took him to the crime scene to observe his behavior, and it became clear to everyone that they had the wrong person in custody. Later, his alibi was confirmed, leaving the investigation at a standstill once again. The victim's family sought the psychic's help again. This time, she claimed to have seen 4 people involved in the crime. According to her, the kidnappers had initially intended to establish communication, but failed. The kidnapping didn't seem to have been planned with a tragic outcome. The psychic concluded that new information would emerge soon. A couple of days later, Mr. Kimberly, hoping to gather some leads, announced a $10,000 reward for information that could help catch the perpetrator. Mr. Kimberly couldn't shake off the psychic's words. He pondered the psychics about the kidnappers wanting to make contact. What could that mean, and what had prevented them from doing so? Upon returning home, he sat at the table and stared at his phone for a while. He suddenly recalled a minor detail from the day Kimberly went missing. He had listened to all the answering machine recordings as he had been expecting his girl to contact him. However, there were no messages except for 2 blank ones with complete silence. He initially thought it was a technical issue or a problem with the connection, but it later became clear that this was not the case. 5 days after her body was found, the police located her car in a quiet area of town, not far from where her body was discovered. The investigators were hoping to find fingerprints in the car, but it had been thoroughly cleaned. The only evidence they found was her hair and a second earring in the passenger compartment. Although it seemed like a breakthrough, it didn't lead anywhere. Kimberly, her father, was linked to a local mob hit due to his wealth and success. However, detectives found no evidence to support the rumors. Kimberly, grieving the loss of his daughter, denied any involvement and was found to conduct his business openly and honestly. In July 1995, a burglary suspect was arrested at a New York City residence. Surprisingly, he shared information about the Kimberly case. The suspect claimed an acquaintance told him that his friends had kidnapped and killed she by burning her. Upon hearing the unidentified man's name, the officers pieced together the crime. The man in question was Joshua Torres, Kimberly's roommate who had participated in the search for her. Detectives took a closer look at the young man, calling him in for further questioning. Although he denied any involvement in the crime, a lengthy conversation revealed a potentially incriminating statement. He mentioned that if he were the kidnapper, he would have fed the victim Kimberly. This statement raised suspicion since there had been no public mention of the victim's hunger, thirst, or cold, and not even her father was aware of these details. To strengthen their case, investigators examined the suspect's past, finding a criminal record and a pattern of obsessive behavior. He was jobless and financially dependent on his roommate, caring for her child, which gave him unmonitored time to plan the crime. Knowing Kimberly's daily routine allowed him to abduct her and hide her in a vacant house. It was unclear why no ransom demands were made. Analyzing the suspect's calls revealed he lied about contacting Kimberly's acquaintances. The dialed numbers belonged to random individuals with no connection to Kimberly. Suspicious messages on his pager further implicated the suspect, Joshua. He had long been a suspect in the eyes of detectives, and they finally gathered enough evidence to arrest him. During the interrogation, they informed him that Kimberly's ex-boyfriend was no longer considered a suspect. Pressed for more information, Torres revealed that he suspected his friends of being responsible for her murder. Torres claimed that he thought his friends only intended to kidnap Kimberly for ransom and then release her unharmed. He admitted to being an accessory to the kidnapping but maintained that he did not think his friends would resort to violence. According to Torres, the plan was to demand a ransom and then let Kimberly go. But things did not go as planned. The kidnappers became frustrated when their ransom demands were met with silence from Mr. Kimberly. Unbeknownst to them, their calls had been answered by Kimberly's father and a ransom message had even been recorded. However, due to a technical issue, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. The kidnappers, feeling ignored and angered by the lack of response, decided to wait and see how events would unfold. It turns out the group feared public attention and the psychics claimed that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was published and broadcast on TV, creating a cycle of events. Joshua was released on bail after speaking with the police but then disappeared. Around the same time, Jose was shot while walking with his wife. Jose's wife later told investigators that her husband didn't trust Joshua and had been gathering evidence against him. She claimed Jose felt guilty about kidnapping Kimberly but not about the house fire. He wanted to confess to the police, just as he had to her. The pager messages and suspect statements helped investigators piece together the kidnapping and crime details. Four men were involved: Joshua, Julio Negrin, Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett, also known as Jay. Notably, Julio had previously dated Kimberly and proposed, but she rejected him. The group was united by friendship and a shared criminal past. However, their actions were far surpassed by the horrific treatment of she at the hands of the guys. Nicholas had recently been released on bail, thanks to his mother's intervention, and had received a lenient fine for a crime that could have resulted in a prison sentence of over a year. Joshua had a history of serious offenses, including child abduction, violence against a minor, and illegal possession of weapons, despite his young age. Nevertheless, he too had received an inappropriately light sentence for his crimes. It was evident that Joshua was the ringleader responsible for coordinating the groups after Kimberly left the party. The men seized her in the parking lot, having apparently been stalking her and waiting for the ideal moment to strike when she was alone. A gun was used to intimidate Kimberly. When she resisted, the perpetrators tied her hands and covered her mouth, eyes, and ears with duct tape. They then put her in the trunk of a car and drove her to an abandoned house, where she was taken to the basement and tied to a chair. To prevent her from making noise, they removed her shoes. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed them money and that she would be released once he paid the debt. Julio was tasked with caring for Kimberly, bringing her food and water twice a day and keeping her warm. However, fearing the consequences, Julio abandoned the house, leaving Kimberly without food, water, or warmth for 3 days. Once Julio left, the kidnappers informed Joshua, who made an audio recording demanding a ransom of $775,000. Then, the kidnapper called Kimberly's father, leaving 2 empty messages. The kidnappers waited for a response, genuinely confused as to why Kimberly's father didn't contact them. Meanwhile, Kimberly, left unattended, suffered from dehydration, passing out multiple times, yet continued to fight for her life. The kidnappers grew angry and fearful of being caught due to the lack of ransom payment, so they decided to release Kimberly. Upon entering the basement, they found her unconscious and assumed she was dead. To eliminate evidence in the hostage, they planned to get rid of her. During the investigation, officers learned from Liz Pace that Joshua used his roommate as an alibi, directing his accomplices while staying at home with his child. Liz Pace initially claimed she was unaware of Joshua's involvement in Kimberly's kidnapping. However, at the trial, she testified against him. She stated that after being interrogated, Joshua approached her and confessed to all his crimes. However, he then turned violent, physically assaulting her, silencing her, and issuing death threats before fleeing. Some time later, Joshua was apprehended by law enforcement. In an effort to further the investigation, the authorities decided to bring the former friends together, informing them that Joshua had denied any involvement in the massacre. Upon learning of Joshua's denial, Julio chose to cooperate with the investigation, revealing crucial information. This cooperation played a pivotal role in securing Torres' conviction for Kimberly's murder. Ultimately, the trio faced charges of murder, arson, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. During the trial, evidence emerged that Joshua had made repeated attempts to deceive investigators and evade punishment. After deliberating for approximately 10 hours, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Torres was sentenced to 58 years in prison. Nicholas Brett received the same sentence as the others. Julio Negrin was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Tomas Kimberly, the victim's family member, was satisfied with the court's verdict and did not want the perpetrators to receive the death penalty. In his opinion, the death penalty would have been too lenient a punishment. Nicholas Brett was repeatedly abused and assaulted in prison and died of AIDS after serving 2 years. Julio Negrin was released after serving his 2-year sentence. Joshua will not be eligible for release until 2053 at the earliest. Tragically, sadly, Kimberly's father, Kimberly, passed away from cancer in 2005. His family believes that the stress and grief caused by his daughter's death contributed to his illness. The life of Kimberly Antonakis, a beautiful young girl, was cut short in a shocking and devastating manner. Washington Heights is a neighborhood in the northernmost part of the New York City borough of Manhattan. With a population of over 100,000, the neighborhood is home to a vibrant and diverse Latin American community. The neighborhood offers a unique cultural experience and a good number of recreational centers which attract several people. However, Washington Heights was known to have high crime rates, especially from the 60s to the early 90s. And it is here in that era that we begin our story. But first, to go back to the very beginning, Robert Worley, also known as Bobby Wells, was born on December 18, 1938. He was the last child of a family of 7, a family he didn't spend much time with before his arrest. In 1963, he was convicted of abuse and assault of a woman and ended up spending 3 years of his life in Sing Sing prison in upstate New York. After Bobby was released from prison in 1969, he changed his name from Robert Worley to Bobby Wells, and he moved in with his brother Fred Worley at Edgecombe Avenue in the Washington Heights neighborhood of Manhattan, New York City. There, he worked as a building superintendent for an apartment building. Bobby stayed with Fred for some time before he disappeared between 1966 and 1967, never to return. Fred and every other member of the family never heard from Bobby for more than 2 decades until 1993, when they got closure most unexpectedly. Fred received a call that his brother was found dead at an apartment that belonged to Dorian Corey, a deceased drag queen. Dorian Corey was born on June 6, 1937 in Buffalo, New York. She attended college at Parsons School of Design in the late 1950s. While Dorian was studying, she was drawn to the underground culture of the ballroom. Since then, Dorian appeared in drag queen beauty pageants. Dorian pushed for her name to be heard, and eventually she gained the fame that she worked for as a drag queen. She appeared in a game-changing documentary titled Paris is Burning, and also appeared on talk shows like The Joan Rivers Show to discuss the ball culture and other things. But even with that, Dorian needed to pay the bills, so she did extra work on the side. She worked out of her apartment as a seamstress, and at the same time, Dorian made her house a safe space for those in need of a home. Folks who came out with their true identity and were rejected by their family found comfort and love in Dorian's home, named House of Corey. In August 1993, Dorian was working with Pepper LaBeija, an American drag queen and fashion designer, on a ball at Webster Hall. Unknown to them, the ball would never take place. On August 29, 1993, 56-year-old Dorian died of AIDS. The 1980s were particularly horrendous for people with AIDS. There were no treatments, and everyone who had AIDS back then died pretty quickly. In the 90s, there were improvements, but there were not enough to cure the likes of Dorian. The whole neighborhood mourned Dorian, as she was one of the people they looked up to in the community. But no one knew the drag queen had a skeleton in her closet. After Dorian died, her belongings were left for her caregiver and friend, Lois Taylor, who sold Dorian's dresses as costumes and made money off them. Taylor would visit Dorian's home with her clients to look at the costume they needed every time there was a business deal. Dorian's apartment was the go-to for any kind of jaw-dropping costume at the time, and as she had worked as a dress and costume designer, it was not a large apartment, and in addition to her belongings, she had a lot of things stored that belonged to her brother. On October 19, 1993, almost 2 months after Dorian's death, Taylor was at her apartment on West 140th Street in Harlem, with one of her customers as usual for business. They were there in hopes of finding a good costume for Halloween. The apartment was filled with lots of fabrics, sequins and beads, tailpieces and elaborate gowns. a place so jam-packed that you could lose a small child in there. The search took them to a large closet space which was the size of a small bedroom, but they found nothing to their taste when they got to the closet. But among the dresses and costumes, a large musty garment bag caught their eyes. In hopes to get something better from the garment bag, Taylor moved closer to it, but discovered the bag was too heavy for her to move. After pulling it with the help of her customer, she saw that the bag was tightly sewn, and so she decided to loosen it. She handed a pair of scissors to her customer to use on the bag, but they stopped almost immediately, driven away by the foul odor that the bag gave off. Immediately, Taylor knew she wouldn't be able to go on with the search, and so she picked up her phone and dialed 911. The early 90s were busy years for the NYPD as they were working tirelessly to curb crimes in the city, especially in Manhattan. But as busy as they were, the call from Dorian's apartment was one they would never forget. The police arrived at the apartment and walked to the closet. They noticed the foul odor coming from the garment bag, an odor that was very common to what police called a DOA or dead on arrival. The garment bag was transported to the medical examiner's office for examination. The police department also involved an anthropologist. The content of the bag was tightly wrapped in thick fabrics and sewn closed with precision, leaving nowhere to enter. Once the wrappings were undone, everyone cringed at the gruesome sight. Before them was the mummified body of a man, bound up and wrapped in plastic. He was folded into the fetal position with a bullet hole in his head. The body was in a dried and shriveled state, so it was difficult to know who he was or when he died. At the time, technology was not advanced enough to identify the remains. The police had a lot to do. They needed to find out the identity of the mummy, how he died, who or what killed and kept him there, the motive behind the murder, and the time it happened. But out of all of these questions, they were able to answer only a few. The identity was unknown, but they found a bullet hole in his head which suggested he was shot to death. In the bag, they also found beer can caps which they used as an indicator of approximately how long the person's remains had been kept there. The type of flip-tops found in the bag were a type that had not been used since the mid-70s, leaving the police to assume that the body had been concealed in there between 15 and 25 years before discovery. The police contacted the missing persons squad to see if anyone was reported missing around the speculated time of death. But to make matters worse, there were no missing reports of anyone from that time. The only thing that could be done was to obtain a fingerprint from the mummy to identify the owner. The state of the body made it difficult for authorities to get a fingerprint from the fingers. Without the identity of the mummified body, the police would be unable to communicate properly regarding the case. And so the remains were named Joe Doe, a name given to unidentified bodies. The detective in charge of identifying Joe Doe, Detective Raul Figueroa, took permissions from his supervisors to remove the body's fingers and work on them. With the approval of his superiors, Detective Raul removed the fingers and placed them in 10 different specimen bottles. He also injected them with acetone to plump them up. Even Detective Raul was not 100% sure that his method was going to work. He could only hope that the method would help them to identify the body. Suddenly, the fingers started turning from nothing at all to fingers that could provide good prints. After that, they were able to put ink on them and roll them onto a fingerprint card to send to another unit. After the proper examination of the fingerprints, they finally got the answers they had been waiting for. Joe Doe was identified as Robert Worley, also known as Bobby Wells. But even after the authorities were able to uncover his identity, they still had a few questions. What was the relationship between Dorian Corey and Bobby Wells? Did Dorian kill Bobby? These questions remained difficult to answer as the two people involved in the case were both deceased. Nevertheless, the authorities continued their search for answers by trying to search for the friends and family of Dorian and Bobby to find any information that could lead to solving the mystery behind Bobby's death. The search led the police to Fred Worley, Bobby's brother. Fred explained how Bobby lived with him and his family and how he tried to talk Bobby out of his lifestyle. According to Fred, Bobby lived a crazy lifestyle where he would drink, get into trouble, and drink again. Whenever Fred tried to talk him out of it, alcohol got in the way. He kept trying to get Bobby to quit drinking, but it seemed he was too deep in it. According to Fred, Bobby got attracted to a woman who lived next door, but soon the relationship grew from sweet to sour. Bobby and the woman had a serious issue that involved the woman's 7-year-old son. Somehow Bobby hit the child and the woman threatened to call the police. Bobby, who had just been released from jail, knew if the woman called the police it would mean bigger trouble for him. And to avoid trouble, he fled the neighborhood without a word to anyone, even his brother. That was the last time Fred heard from Bobby. until he was called almost 25 years later and told that his brother had been found dead. When Fred was interviewed, he was asked if he was surprised to know that his brother was dead, and he said he was not really surprised because once they didn't hear from Bobby for many years, they had already assumed that something had befallen him. He was also asked if Bobby was friends with transvestites, people who wear clothes primarily associated with the other sex. Fred said he knew his brother was in a relationship with a certain transvestite. Bobby had mistakenly dialed Fred's contact one day when he was drunk, and he ranted about having issues with a transvestite. Fred didn't remember the name of the transvestite, but when he was asked if the name he heard was Dorian, he said that was the name. All the information that Fred gave the police didn't point to anyone as Bobby's murderer. It only made solving the case more difficult. The first person the police suspected after the 911 call at Dorian's apartment was Taylor, who made the call. But Taylor gave them a reason to eliminate her from the suspect list. She told the police she couldn't have possibly moved the bag with the body as it was far too heavy, and she weighed only 135 pounds. The case was and still is disturbing as a lot of questions are unanswered. Many of those who knew Dorian personally were very shocked to learn about the mummy in her closet all these years. While some were disappointed in Dorian, some didn't believe she would kill anyone. There were many speculations and theories about this case. Many friends of Dorian admitted that she was in a relationship with Bobby, and according to the friends, both Dorian and Bobby would always get drunk and violent with each other. Whenever they had too much to drink, they ended up fighting seriously. Fred also mentioned that he knew his brother to be macho and violent, and that he sometimes could go too far. Because of these accounts by friends, there's a theory that one of Dorian and Bobby's violent spats led to Dorian shooting Bobby in the head. Most people believe that Bobby had potentially been an abusive ex-lover of Dorian and that she may have shot him in self-defense when he was abusing her, as this was a common occurrence in the trans community. The abuse that became rampant in the trans community probably made Dorian own a handgun. Dorian's friend Jessie Torres affirmed during her interview that Dorian had a small .22 caliber. Many others maintain that Bobby was a burglar who broke into Dorian's home, prompting her to act in self-defense. Allegedly, Dorian attached a note to Bobby's body reading, "This poor man broke into my home and was trying to rob me." The note was never confirmed by police. However, this theory suggests Dorian kept the body because a drag queen like her, who lived in a poor and dangerous area in the 60s and 70s, had little chance of gaining sympathy from the police. According to Taylor, after she discovered the heavy bag, she found a short story written by Dorian. She said the story was written in the third person about a transgender woman who killed her lover in revenge. The lover had pressured the trans woman into having sex reassignment surgery. Many believe the story relates to Dorian's. She had a breast implant and had possibly taken female hormones. Therefore, the story references Dorian's life, including the Pearl Box Review, which was a touring drag show she had performed with in the 60s. According to Trisha Zeigenhorn's article, Did You Know?, a friend of Dorian claimed that Dorian confessed on her deathbed to committing a murder. It is not clear if the police interviewed the said friend, but if they did, nothing came out of it. In spite of all these theories, some people believe Dorian had nothing to do with the killing. Len Telmy, who was also Dorian's friend, said he had been to her place several times and never smelled a foul odor aside from a musty stench, he said, was common in older New York City buildings. After the police spoke to some of Dorian's friends, they were thrown into more confusion as some implied that in 1988, Dorian moved from her apartment at 150th Street, St. Nicholas Avenue to one located 10 blocks over on West 140th Street. With this information, some posited that the body was in the closet of the apartment before Dorian moved in. Therefore, some believed that Dorian was probably hiding the body in her closet to protect the actual murderer. None of these theories were confirmed true by the police as there was no valid evidence to back these claims and stories. However, the most accepted version was that Bobby was an abusive ex-lover who got shot in self-defense. Bobby's family didn't claim his body. He was buried on Hart Island off the coast of the Bronx in November 1993 in an area called Potter's Field. No funeral was held for Bobby. Dorian's ashes were also spread on City Island. And that's how the case of Bobby Wells remains a mystery today. All that Bobby's family knows is that he was murdered, but they are not sure who killed him or what led to his death. No one knows what happened except for Bobby and Dorian, who are both dead. Without any type of first-hand testimony from either of the two or both of them, we can agree that the mystery of how Bobby died and how he ended up mummified in a famous drag queen's closet will never be solved. But if Dorian truly killed Bobby, Jennifer Sophia Martellise was born June 8, 1975. At the age of 7, she lived at 1204 East 98th Avenue in a duplex in Tampa with her father and stepmother. She was a second-grade student at Shaw Elementary School, which was only 1 mile from her home. She was described as a good student and very well behaved. Her parents had recently divorced and her mother had legal custody of her. On November 15, 1982, about 3 p.m., Jennifer asked a friend to watch her as she continued to walk home from school because she was scared. Her friend turned away for a moment and Jennifer disappeared around 15th and 109th Avenue, just 1 block from her home. After her disappearance, both sides of her family accused one another of hiding Jennifer, but eventually all her relatives were ruled out as suspects. Authorities suspected Thomas Peter Wilnicki had something to do with her disappearance because he was a family friend who Jennifer knew and trusted. He also lived in the other half of the duplex where she lived and had an extensive criminal history for drug possession, theft, and minor assault. When questioned by police, he claimed to be a psychic and to have a vision of Jennifer's abduction and murder. He gave a 22-page rambling statement that he had psychic feelings about her case. He said she was abducted and strangled by 2 men. One of them, he said, was in his 40s and had a criminal history, and the other was a blonde man in his mid-20s whom Jennifer knew and trusted, and whose conscience troubled him deeply after her death. Thomas also appeared obsessed with the blonde man's teeth. Several times he repeated that the man's teeth were beautiful, perfect, and white, but his own teeth have been described as bad. Strangely, Thomas himself matched the description of the blonde man in some ways. An expert analysis stated that those words were that of a confession, but he denied this. Thomas had arrest in Tampa dating back to 1976, and in 1991, he was charged with possession of heroin and sentenced to prison. He agreed to a polygraph test and failed. However, this may have been because he was taking medication to prevent seizures. To this day, Thomas has never been charged in connection with Jennifer's case, but in 2010, he was charged with pouring piping hot cocoa on his roommate over a dispute. Years later, another person of interest arose. A woman named Anna, who was 10 years old at the time of Jennifer's disappearance, reported that she thought Steve Wisnowski could have been involved. She said she lived on Rankin Air Shaft Road near him, but he also had a second home in the Tampa area, just 5 blocks from Jennifer's home at the time of her disappearance. He also owned a brown vehicle that was seen in the area when she was abducted. The brown vehicle he owned was one he used to drive from Pennsylvania to Florida. She says he was a bad man and did some horrible things to her and her sister, who sadly has since committed suicide. She says she recalls when Jennifer went missing because Steve had an article about the little girl. She also stated that he claimed to know her because he had another home in Tampa, just 5 blocks from Jennifer's home. Steve had been to Tampa alone without his wife and son at the time she went missing. When he returned, there was a large hole dug on the property, and he pulled a very large garbage bag out of his trunk and disappeared into the woods with it. Anna says the hole was later filled in. 2012, 30 years after her disappearance, police in Fayette County obtained search warrants for 6 properties related to Steve, who has since passed away. One at 622 Rankin Air Shaft Road and the others on Gilchrist Road. All the properties were in the area of heavily dense woods. A forensic anthropologist, along with his grad students and police, dug at a site in a heavily wooded area on Rankin Air Shaft Road but didn't find anything. His home there has since been torn down and a new home built at the site. Jennifer's Aunt Nancy wanted to do something to raise awareness of the case, so she started writing a movie. She called it She Could Be You, and the movie has more than 160 scenes. The family rented the duplex where Jennifer lived and redecorated her room with stuffed animals, just as it was in 1982. Her mother self-published a book about it in 2011 titled Jennifer, Where Are You? As of today, Jennifer has never been found. No arrest has been made, and this case remains unsolved. The location of our next case is Santa Rosa in California's Sonoma County, a city well known for its wineries. Firstly, before we discuss the events that took place there, let us travel to Bellingham, a city in San Mateo County, California. Noelle Russo was born in the 1940s and raised in San Mateo County, California, though not much is known about her family. At 16, she won the title of Miss Bellingham in a beauty pageant in 1962, which attracted local attention and made headlines. She stated in an interview for an article that she wanted to be a model and that her favorite sport was twist dancing. Russo's radiant smile was captured in an accompanying photograph showing her clutching a bouquet of flowers. Russo's life saw a lot of changes during the next 20 years, including 2 marriages and 2 divorces, as well as the birth of a son. She had briefly left her Bay Area residence to pursue a career as a trainee forest ranger in Colorado. She eventually made her way back to the Bay Area and enrolled in Santa Rosa Junior College there. Russo liked to ride her bike around town, but friends who knew her back then said that she also had a habit of hitchhiking, which alarmed her friends because they thought she might put too much trust in random people. After a fight with a boyfriend on Friday, June 24, 1983, Russo, who was 37 years old at the time, went to stay with a friend in Santa Rosa. It is unknown what sparked their argument or who this boyfriend was. Russo's friend offered to drive her to Courthouse Square that evening so she could take a Golden Gate Transit bus back to her Rohnert Park apartment. Unfortunately, Russo disappeared without a trace after that. A disturbing discovery was made on Monday, June 27, 1983, in Rohnert Park, close to Sonoma State University. A 7-year-old boy discovered Russo's lifeless body behind a real estate office at the intersection of Petaluma Hill Road and East Cotide Avenue. She was discovered nude. Sonoma County Sheriff's Office deputies arrived on the scene quickly and launched an investigation. It was concluded that Russo had died a horrible death after being struck to death by a piece of lumber from a nearby stack of wood. Investigators from the Violent Crime Investigations Unit began a thorough investigation into Russo's tragic circumstance. According to their initial assessment, Russo most likely never took the bus back to Rohnert Park, meaning that she probably met someone before the bus arrived. During the course of this investigation, cops and detectives collected a significant amount of evidence and spoke with numerous people. Investigators hired a sketch artist in the days that followed the tragic event to help them create a drawing of Russo wearing the clothing she had on June 24, 1983. In an attempt to generate leads, they distributed it to the general public. While some people were named as persons of interest in the case by detectives over the years, no arrests were made. Sadly, Russo's killer's trail dried up, leaving her horrific murder unsolved. The committed detective from the Violent Crime Investigations Unit kept following leads in the case as the years went by. Between 2010 and 2023, law enforcement officials sent multiple pieces of evidence for DNA analysis to the Santa Clara County Crime Lab and the Serological Research Institute. By 2023, investigators were able to positively identify a suspect, which was the result of their persistent efforts. It turned out to be Alfredo Carotero Jr., a 65-year-old man. But authorities never disclosed the precise type of evidence that supported Carotero's involvement in this protractedly unresolved case. Authorities also provided a limited amount of Carotero-related information. He had previously been found guilty in Sonoma County of possession of stolen property and drug possession in 1995 and 2001, respectively. Investigators obtained a warrant for Carotero's arrest in relation to Russo's death. They were able to successfully capture him on October 2, 2023. After that, he was charged with murder and taken into the Sonoma County Main Adult Detention Facility. He is currently being held without the possibility of posting bail. Russo's family was notified of the arrest and asked to remain anonymous during this trying time. "20-year-old Sophie Sergi lived in Pitkas Point, Alaska in 1993. On April 25th, she went to visit a friend of hers at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. The last time Sophie was seen was when she left her group of friends to smoke a cigarette outside. The next morning, a janitor found Sophie's body in a dormitory bathtub. She had been stabbed multiple times, shot in the back of the head, and also indecently assaulted. Investigators collected evidence from the crime scene, including male DNA from Sophie's body. They also interviewed Sophie's friends and other people that either lived in the dorm or studied at the university that might know something. Unfortunately, investigators were not able to find a substantial lead that would help them find the perpetrator. The case then went cold. In 2019, investigators decided to take another look at the case. This time, they had more advanced DNA technology to aid them. Investigators took the DNA of the unknown man that was collected from Sophie's body and submitted it into a public DNA database. They were then able to find a relative of the suspect. They believed it was his aunt that they found. She had uploaded a sample to a commercial online genealogy database. The man who they believed was responsible is 47-year-old Stephen Downs. Still, in 2019, investigators executed a search warrant at his home in Auburn, Maine. They collected a DNA sample from him. This DNA sample matched the one collected from the crime scene back in 1993. He was then promptly arrested. Downs' trial began in January of 2022. During the trial, jurors heard from people who were at the dorm on the night of the crime, forensic experts, and law enforcement. We learned that Downs was a freshman at the university in 1993 and lived in a dorm where Sophie's life was taken. Downs' friend and then roommate testified that he owned guns and a large hunting knife, including a .22 caliber pistol. An expert testified that Sophie was shot with a .22 caliber bullet. Downs did not testify at the trial, but jurors heard a recording of his conversation with investigators. He denied knowing Sophie and keeping a gun in his dorm room. In the recording, he also told police that he was with his then-girlfriend all evening when the crime took place. The girlfriend testified during the trial that Downs had left the room several times that evening. During closing statements, prosecutor Jenna Gerstein encouraged jurors to remember that Downs' DNA was found at the scene, and that the alternative suspects raised by the defense had been ruled out because their own DNA did not match any found at the scene. The jury deliberated for days before reaching a verdict on February 8, 2022. Downs was found guilty of both charges against him. Jenna Gerstein said, "We are grateful that Stephen Downs was held accountable for his actions after almost 30 years and hope that Sophie's family and the Fairbanks community as a whole are able to obtain some closure." In light of this verdict, Downs' attorney, James Hownick, said that Downs and his team of defense lawyers were disappointed by the verdict and that there would likely be an appeal. "It was a very emotional and difficult case," he said. "Obviously, we continue to believe in the innocence of our client, but we also respect the process and we respect the jury's verdict." Hownick said questions about the genetic genealogy will likely be erased on appeal. The science is relatively new, and Downs is the first man in Alaska to stand trial for a charge that resulted from genetic genealogy. The science is controversial when used by law enforcement because it could infringe on constitutional rights, Hownick said. "A lot of people across the country are watching this case and wondering whether it's going to go up to the Supreme Court, and this could be the opportunity to litigate that," he said. "So we'll see." Downs is being held without bail at the Fairbanks Correctional Center and is scheduled to be sentenced in September. He faces a max. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Freeman was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to parents Troy and Jennifer Freeman. Alongside his brother Blake, Stephen enjoyed a happy, healthy childhood free of problems with his parents or society. As a friendly, responsive person, he built strong relationships with many friends, who often described him as exceptionally calm. Growing up in Griffin, Stephen attended Spalding High School and later Gordon State College. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, is known for her cheerful, humorous, and friendly personality. Mary expressed her creativity by performing mini plays for family and neighbors. In their senior years, Mary and Stephen fell deeply in love and remained inseparable. Shared interests brought the couple closer together, as they often spent time in nature, enjoying activities such as hiking, fishing, and hunting. After publicly announcing their relationship on Facebook in February 2012, Stephen frequently posted photos with Mary. Both families were pleased with the young couple's relationship. Mary's family adored Stephen, and his parents welcomed Mary as a second daughter. Upon finishing school, Stephen and Mary moved in together. Stephen secured a job at Drain, Gutters, and Roofing Incorporated as a plumber, while Mary worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School. She also worked part-time at a local gun store. In 2018, Stephen and his girlfriend Mary had been living together for 7 years. On August 1, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a panicked state. She claimed she had unknowingly shot her boyfriend with a Glock 43 firearm, thinking it was unloaded. When paramedics and police arrived at their home on Sunnybrook Drive, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away by law enforcement officers, who examined Stephen and provided first aid. Despite his severe chest wound, Stephen was still breathing when paramedics arrived. Stephen, 23, was quickly taken to Spalding Regional Hospital, but his condition worsened, and his heart stopped just before midnight. Mary, still reeling from the incident, was required to give a statement at the police station. During questioning, she reiterated her claim that the shooting was an accident. Mary explained that her home had always had firearms, and her boyfriend Stephen would leave a pistol on the nightstand at night for protection, as they lived outside the city. On the evening in question, Mary claimed she had simply intended to hand Stephen the pistol, and it accidentally went off. She had no knowledge the gun was loaded at the time. Mary emphasized that Stephen was the love of her life and she would never intentionally harm him. When investigators examined the scene, they found evidence suggesting the act might have been planned in advance. In the kitchen, signs of a struggle were visible, with food and dishes scattered around. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found it hard to believe Mary's story and decided to further investigate the evidence. Mary was brought in for another interrogation. This time, the investigators applied pressure. They raised their voices, doubted her account, and demanded honesty. The tactic worked, and she confessed to shooting her boyfriend in a fit of anger. She revealed that they had a severe argument that night, and she wanted to leave him. Investigators recorded the conversation, capturing her admission of guilt and essentially resolving the case with a candid confession. A technical issue occurred, resulting in the loss of most of the recording, with only fragments of interference and indistinct noises remaining. The reason for this technical failure was unknown, and it was surprising that no one had made a backup copy of such crucial evidence. Further investigation led to the discovery that the pistol was not capable of accidental discharge, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. This meant that the gun had to be intentionally pointed at Stephen for the bullet to hit him. Detectives also expressed skepticism about Mary's behavior and questioned whether her distress was genuine or false. They continued to collect evidence, slowly piecing together the case. However, Mary's own words raised another important question about the accident. Investigations revealed that she had previously worked at a gun store, where employees received extensive training on handling firearms before starting work. This strongly suggested that Mary should have known how to safely handle a pistol and that an accident was highly unlikely. The investigation into the accident revealed inconsistencies with the initial testimony. Mary gave multiple conflicting statements during the investigation. Initially, she said Stephen's death was an accident, claiming she was handing him the pistol directly. Then it accidentally discharged. However, during further questioning, Mary let slip that she had actually tossed the pistol to Stephen at his request, resulting in the accidental discharge. These contradictory statements raised suspicions, as Mary's story kept changing. As a result, she was detained at the Spalding County Jail and charged with felony malice murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm. Lieutenant Wilson strongly disputed Mary's claim that the incident was an accident and sought to prove that she had deliberately planned the act. A recent discovery shed light on the case. A small amount of cooking grease was found on the pistol slide. This indicated that the pistol had been handled recently, with the magazine possibly being emptied, reloaded, and placed back on a shelf. Mary defended herself by explaining that she was preparing dinner for Stephen on the evening in question, which would explain the grease found on the slide. Despite further investigation, speaking with Mary and Stephen's relatives and friends did not shed much light on the situation. It was revealed that the couple, who began dating as teenagers, had a complex and on-again, off-again relationship marked by numerous breakups and reconciliations. The relationship between Mary and Stephen was tumultuous and often marked by heated arguments. Mary would escalate to screaming at Stephen, physically lashing out at him and prompting him to leave the house for the night to stay with friends. In an attempt to cope with the emotions of the moment, Stephen would usually turn off his phone, while Mary would continue calling and texting him. Mary's behavior went beyond just verbal arguments. She frequently tried to control Stephen's actions, leading to him feeling frustrated and helpless. Furthermore, Stephen confided in his friends about instances where Mary would pull out a pistol during fights, threatening to harm either herself or Stephen. Despite the severity of these incidents, Stephen chose not to report them to the police out of concern that Mary would face jail time. Stephen's friend, Thomas Skinner, revealed some critical information during an interrogation. He stated that just 2 days before the tragic incident, Stephen and Mary had exchanged affectionate messages, wishing each other a good day. However, the situation took a drastic turn the following day, when Stephen told his mother he didn't want to come home because of the unbearable situation, saying he would rather stay with Thomas. On the night of August 1, 2018, when Stephen failed to come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages, desperately pleading with him to return. That evening, Mary prepared dinner, expecting her boyfriend Stephen to return home. She found out from Stephen's mother that he was at his friend Thomas's place. Mary drove to pick him up and encountered them on the road. She rolled down her window and told Stephen that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen agreed to come home, but the evening ended in a tragic incident. A year after Stephen's death, Mary went on trial in June 2019. Before the trial, the prosecution offered Mary a deal. life in prison with the chance of parole if she admitted to the crime. Despite this opportunity, Mary refused the offer and maintained her innocence. During the initial court hearings, Mary vigorously defended herself. She insisted that the incident was an accident and that she had no intention of harming Stephen, emphasizing her deep love for him. She also made a shocking accusation, claiming that Stephen had a history of abusing her. According to her, he physically assaulted her on 2 occasions and even forced himself on her. On the day of the tragic incident, Stephen allegedly attacked her, forcing her to defend herself. It became clear that the couple's relationship had been deteriorating for quite some time. Friends and relatives noted that Mary had been furious with Stephen for frequently ignoring her messages and calls. Mary's behavior had become more and more demanding in the days before the incident, and she had become very insistent on getting her way. On the night of the shooting, Stephen returned home, but he refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him. This rejection seemingly pushed her over the edge, and she fired at him. Prosecutor Kate Leonard presented evidence in court that suggested Mary shot Stephen in anger when Stephen finally came home but refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared for him. Key evidence included grease found on the pistol, as well as a sheet from the mattress where Stephen was found bleeding. Forensic analysis of bloodstains on the bedsheets showed that Stephen did not attack or approach Mary at the time of the shooting. Instead, the evidence suggested he was calmly sitting on the bed, motionless. If he had been moving, the bloodstains would have been more widespread, but they were confined to one area of the sheet. Mary faced the possibility of life imprisonment once again. She made the risky decision to testify truthfully in court, her voice filled with emotion and tears in her eyes. In front of the judge, she described Stephen as a controlling and violent man. She presented evidence to back up her claim, saying she shot Stephen in self-defense after an argument on the night of the incident. Mary sadly shared many stories from her life with Stephen, saying he physically and emotionally abused her. She claimed that Stephen frequently hit her violently and made threats over minor infractions or disobedience. She was constantly manipulated and controlled. Stephen monitored everything she did, from her spending to her friendships and even what she ate. His extreme possessiveness left Mary extremely anxious and depressed. Her feelings of love and fear for Stephen made her hesitant to report his behavior to the authorities. However, reviewing text messages from Mary's old phone raised questions about who was the actual abuser and manipulator in the relationship. These messages, spanning 18 months, showed Stephen's aggression, but they also exposed Mary's infidelity. While some of the messages contained harsh language and threats from Stephen, they were often in response to his own pain and anger caused by Mary's infidelity. Mary said that Stephen had previously forced himself on her twice. She feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018, which led her to defend herself. To support Mary's statement, the defense presented expert testimony and called close relatives, including her sister Sarah Higdon. Mary's sister described seeing bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the incident and regretted not photographing them or taking action at the time. During her testimony, Mary expressed her emotions as she recounted the incident of that night. She had decided to end her relationship with Stephen and told him to leave, but he became angry and attacked her. In response, Mary grabbed a pistol from her nightstand, and it accidentally discharged. The prosecution and defense presented conflicting perspectives, the prosecution portraying Stephen as the victim and the defense claiming Mary acted in self-defense. Stephen's friends attempted to portray him positively, describing him as a loyal and hardworking person. They portrayed Mary as a possessive girlfriend who controlled Stephen and threatened to harm herself whenever he tried to leave the relationship. According to Thomas, one of Stephen's closest friends, Mary's behavior had become more and more damaging and unacceptable over time. He claimed she once even pointed a pistol at her head during an argument, implying that her actions were to maintain control over Stephen. Alicia Varela, Stephen's co-worker, testified that Mary would frequently call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Leonard pointed out. Mary described their relationship as deteriorating and claimed the shooting was in self-defense, but she failed to mention the specific moment when she pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Leonard questioned Mary's claims, noting that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned Stephen's alleged abuse. To recreate the incident of the shooting, prosecutor Kate held the pistol and described the scene. According to Kate, Stephen came home, and the couple argued over dinner. When Stephen refused to eat, Mary, in a rage, threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen then went to the bedroom to avoid further conflict, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, instead of calming down, Mary called out to Stephen twice without receiving a response. She then entered the bedroom, where she shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Leonard concluded her arguments by asking the jury to consider the inconsistencies in Mary's story, which had changed significantly after repeated interrogations. The prosecution presented additional evidence to counter Mary's claims. A forensic examination revealed that Stephen was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, contradicting Mary's assertion that he was attacking her. Mary claimed the gun was normally kept unloaded in the house, but detectives suspected it may have been loaded in advance on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a meal for Stephen. The evidence supporting this theory included grease marks found not only on the slide of the pistol but also inside it, raising questions about whether Mary had loaded the pistol prior to the incident. Everyone who knew Stephen testified that he was not an aggressive person. However, prosecutors noted that Mary repeatedly changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which she attributed to her fear. Mary had earlier rejected a plea deal that could have saved her from a death penalty sentence, and the long wait for the verdict was unbearable for her. The jury was persuaded by the arguments presented by jurors Victor and Chris. After hearing from all witnesses and Mary herself, the jury was tasked with making a decision. After careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. Mary Catherine Higdon was not guilty on all charges. The jury's decision shocked and outraged many in the courtroom, especially Jennifer Freeman, Stephen's mother, who struggled to contain her anger at the jury as she watched the woman who took her son's life walk free. They found it difficult to comprehend how the jurors could reach such a verdict. Following her acquittal, Mary returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has chosen to maintain a low profile, avoiding the public eye and media attention. Her social media presence is minimal, with her Instagram profile set to private. Little is known about Mary's current life, and it is assumed that she has moved on from her difficult past to live a quiet and private life. Stephen's mother paid a heartfelt tribute to her son on social media. In his outgoing spirit, he made friends with everyone he met, but those who shared his passion for hunting and fishing held a special place in his heart. His kind nature, warm smile, and charm left a lasting impression on those around him. Stephen's way of expressing love was unique and special. He made you feel like you were the only person in the world, bringing laughter and joy to those who spent time with him. His warm smile and welcoming hugs made everyone feel loved and appreciated.